Sheriff Arpaio would periodically come in the jail, and you would know he had entered the jail because the walls would start shaking. People are banging on the tables, banging on the walls. You wouldn't eat this crap. Would you feed this crap to your family, Sheriff Joe Arpaio? Blah, 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 blah. So, it was all front, but it created an extremely dangerous environment. It wasn't just the drug and gang infested mayhem, Michael. It was the staff, and it came down from the top. National Geographic researched the death rate at that jail, and 62 people died around the time I was there over a 5-year period, many of them at the hands of the guards. And people can Google this.
I walk in redemption.
Yeah, we knew how to move around during that time for some reason, and listen, I get asked all the time, the scene in Goodfellas when Henry Hill and Paulie were in there and they were getting, I said, look, it's not quite that good, but we had it okay. We had it better than the rest. Let's put it that way.
So I was getting sweated early on because an article came out in the Phoenix New Times about my drug empire. It said the evil empire, English Shaun. And people then started sweating me to bring drugs in. These neo-Nazi guys were like, you've got connections. Have you, your girlfriend bring drugs in? So I was getting worried. But what happened was there was a race riot. So there was 4 gangs. There was the head of the whites, head of the blacks, head of the Mexicans, head of the Mexican Americans. Head of the whites at that time was a cocky guy. And his attitude went through the roof when this cage fighter called Gravedigger moved in, and he was using him as an enforcer. Gravedigger had a tattoo of the devil on his chest as a puppet master, and the guards had been watching him and making bets on fights, and he was just pinning people down in wrestling locks and chiseling their faces in and leaving them in pools of blood. So he shows up in our pod, and then the head of the whites gets cockier and cockier. So we're all out for breakfast one morning. The head of the blacks is out there, and I'll call him Smackdown. He'd never lost a fight. And the head of the whites said something rude to him, and the head of the blacks said, hey, punk-ass white boy, who you calling this? And then he called the head of the whites a punk-ass bitch, which is fight on the spot, or else you're going to get rolled up. So what happened was they went into a cell under the stairs. The head of the blacks, it was a trained fighter, smashed the shit out of this guy.
Really?
He ran out of the cell into a pole and dinged his head on it, sat down at the table with the whites, and thought that was the end of the matter. Now everybody in the pod then is like, go back in. And the guy, the cage fighter guy, who was like 6.5 foot almost, he just looks over at the head of the whites and goes, you need to go back in, Wood. And the head of the whites said, I went in, I fought, he won, it's over. And then the cage fighter just stood up and just towered above him. And he goes, you need to go back in now, or else you're going to have to roll up. So he knew what time it was. He went back in. He got smashed again. And the cage fighter took over as the head of the whites. But that head of the blacks, he was bullying members of all of the races. I mean, this was a jail where you couldn't eat the food. There was 2 meals a day. Green bologna and moldy bread was the breakfast. Yeah. Evening meal was a mystery meat slop called Red Death that sometimes had a dead rat in it. So basically, your $20 to $30 a week commissary, that was what kept you alive. Yeah. And the head of the blacks came in my cell one day and he's like trying to sweat me for a Snickers bar. And I'm like, I'm going to starve if I give this up, dog. He went in the end, but he had been bullying people of all races. So all 3 races got together and made a decision. He said, look, what we're going to do is, because he's such a good fighter, each race is going to send a torpedo into his cell when he's on his own to smash him and get rid of him. And we're going to have extra torpedoes on the upper tier just in case any of his torpedoes try and get in to back him up. So there's a white torpedo, and there was a Chicano, and there was a Mexican American. So I remember the day clearly now. I'm on the phone to my girlfriend. Most people are downstairs in the day room 45-man pod, little table on the wall, steel octagonal tables bolted to the floor. The blacks are slapping the dominoes down. Some people are watching the TV. And you know when shit starts to happen, the mood switches. Yeah. And these three guys go in. Now, I later learned what happened was the Wood guy, he was an old cowboy, and he grabs SmackDown in a headlock. But because SmackDown was a trained fighter, he just sandwiched him against the wall, put his head forward, flipped his head back, and instantly broke his nose. The other guys are pummeling him. Next thing, all the blacks hear the commotion. They start to run up the stairs, and then all hell breaks loose. People are grabbing mops and brooms and doing ninja moves. There's this huge battle on the stairs. There's this massive guy. He just comes down the stairs like a bowling ball and just knocks everybody off the stairs. I'm on the phone with my girlfriend. I look over at the fish bubble. There's 2 guards on duty. They're supposed to wait for backup before going into a situation, but they were particularly tough guards on duty that day. One of them had a serious reputation. He put on a spacesuit. He grabbed a fire extinguisher-sized canister of chemical spray, and he's coming down the fishbowl. Next thing, the sliding door opens, zzz, and he just comes running in and just starts blasting everybody. By now, I've got up the stairs and I'm in the cell. The pepper spray's in my nose, the snot's running, the water's running down my face. I had an old-timer cellmate, and he's like, look, what you got to do is wrap a wet towel around your head so it doesn't get in your eyes. Anyway, they went to the cell where by now only the head of the blacks and the white torpedo were left in it, and they were still fighting. And they just opened up, spraying, and they were still fighting blind. When the fight had ended, the white guy came out first. His nose was pointing over here, and he said in a polite cowboy twang, do you mind if I fix my nose before you put the handcuffs on? And the guards are just looking at him, and he just puts his nose back into place. The head of the blacks came out next, and he didn't have a scratch on him. And he was like, I'm going to get all y'all for that 3-on-1 bullshit when I get out the hole. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what it was like in there. But after that race riot, the guys who were sweating me to bring drugs in, they got moved. So that threat to me ended. And it was the Italian mafia came in and took over after that.
Well, Shaun, it's crazy. When I was doing federal time, I was in Lompoc Federal Prison when the state came to pick me up to try to indict me 3 days before the statute of limitations expired in the state for the same crime that I was already doing a parole violation for. They just tried to add on. So when the state comes to pick me up, I'm in R&D, and I knew the CO pretty well. And he says, Michael, you ever been to LA County Jail? I said, no, that's one I missed. Mostly my stuff was in New York. He said, well, I'm going to do you a big favor right now. He says, because that's Animal House. I said, what's that? So when the sheriffs came in, he said, listen, this is a very important federal prisoner. We want him back here exactly the way we're sending him to you. And he took photos of me right then and there. He says, I'm documenting this. And I'm saying, man, where the hell are they sending me, right? So because of that, they put me in lockdown. I was on death row. I was there with the Menendez brothers, the same tier that OJ later came in on. Everybody was facing life without or the gas chamber. And then there was me on a parole violation. But after walking me through the hospital and going through all that stuff and then being in a library and getting some stuff up there, they did me a big favor. LA County was probably the same as you described. So all you young people, all you young hoodlums out there that are watching this, okay, I hope you're hearing that. You don't ever want to end up in a state jail or a county jail, I should say, because, if you survive the experience, you'll be very fortunate without coming out with some real big scars or coming out at all. Anyway, so that was crazy. So now, what happens now? When did you get out of there? Did you ever meet up with Sheriff Arpaio?
So, Sheriff Arpaio would periodically come in the jail. Mm-hmm. Now, on the news clips, he's got adoring inmates around him. He's got them like digging graves for people who are indigent and picking up trash on the side of the roads in black and white stripes. And they're all like, yeah, Sheriff, you've saved my life. I'm off the drugs. Your program, it really works. Reality is, as soon as he came in the jail, he was a tiny little man surrounded by a huge goon squad. And you would know he had entered the jail because the walls would start shaking. People are banging on the tables, banging on the walls. You wouldn't eat this crap. Would you feed this crap to your family, Sheriff Joe Arpaio? Blah, 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 blah. So, you know, it was all front, but it created an extremely dangerous environment. It wasn't just the drug and gang infested mayhem, Michael. It was the staff, and it came down from the top. National Geographic researched the death rate at that jail, and 62 people died around the time I was there over a 5-year period. Many of them at the hands of the guards, and people can Google this. Scott Norberg, Brian Crenshaw was a blind prisoner, failed to produce his ID for the evening meal. Guards pulverized him. He went into a coma and he died over a month later. Scott Norberg, mentally ill man, wandering in the neighborhood. They started to beat him up, and a female guard said, "Stop beating him, he's turned blue." And they pushed her off. They kept beating him. The inmates are yelling, "Why are you beating him? He's already dead." And they were like a pack of wolves, just they couldn't stop themselves, still beating the corpse. And it's like something just takes over that side of the brain when the violence kicks in, and they can't stop themselves from beating a man who's turned blue. It's off the scale. So we started, because all these things were going on, I was writing home in letters to my family. And this is how my internet presence started, Michael, in 2004. We started a blog. I was moved a year later. I went for a bail reduction. They doubled it to 1.5 million. So I was moved to maximum security where I was living with the cockroaches. I've got endless stories about them. My family, there was a blog written by a guy called Salem Pax. This is when blogs were just starting. So my aunt would come and smuggle my writing out of the maximum security Madison Street jail and type them up, email them to my family in Cheshire near Liverpool. And they put them online as a blog, John's Jail Journal, JON, so people wouldn't know it was me. All those entries are still time-stamped.
Really?
So my journeys, all my journeys documented going back almost 20 years. But that blog went on to attract international media attention to the conditions in the Madison Street Jail. And in the work we were doing with other organizations, such as Mothers Against Ohio, that jail was closed down a couple of years later. Sheriff Joe Arpaio was indicted because he was a big-time racist for racial profiling. And he was looking at spending 6 months in his own jail, but he actually got pardoned. But Trump. He did get kicked out. He got pardoned, yeah. He did get kicked out eventually, which is a good thing. But I spent 26 months in there before I got sentenced to 9.5 years. I was looking at a maximum 200-year sentence.
Well, I got to tell you, I know Arpaio was, parading around in the media as this social justice warrior, really tried to clean up his image, that he was tough on crime, but, obviously he didn't portray himself the way he really was. And then he does get indicted finally. And if you had anything to do with that, that's great, because certainly a lot of people would appreciate that, because a lot of people knew exactly who he was, from the inside. And when Trump pardoned him, there was a lot of controversy about that. I mean, because people knew who he really was all about. But, that's just evil, Shaun. That's just evil. It's something, a guy like that should never be in that position. Never. Just a bad person. But anyway, you survived it. You end up with 9.5 years. Did you do the 9 here in the States? Did you do your time here?
So the lawyer that I shared with our friend in the Italian Mafia was actually recommended to me by La M, the New Mexican Mafia, who schooled me on legal etiquette. They said, if you ever get in trouble, serious trouble, this guy's going to cost some money, but he's a loophole lawyer, and he will do the business for you. So I'd flown people over from the UK and put money in their names, thinking I wouldn't have to contact my mum and dad for money. But the cops had put a virus in my computer, and they took all the money. So when I was arrested, I had to turn to my parents with the name of that lawyer. They remortgaged the house, $100,000, and through a loophole for first-time non-violent drug offenders, he managed to get me what's called a half-time release on the balance of my 9.5-year sentence, whereby after my 26 months back time in the Maricopa County Jail system, by the time I finished my DOC time, I'd only served just under 6 years.
Wow. So that was a good move, hiring that attorney.
I'd still be in prison now, Michael, if we hadn't got him.
Yeah. Now, are you prohibited from coming to the States? You
Part
can't
of
come
my
back
plea
here?
bargain is I'm banned for life from America.
And is there there's no way around that now? Is there an appeal for that in any way? I mean, if you agreed to it in an appeal, that doesn't mean that it's ironclad. There still could be another loophole to get you out of that.
You got to get some kind of presidential pardon, which costs millions. But I was contacted by someone about doing a sit down with Sammy the Bull because I've never met him. And they wanted me to come to America to do that. But it was discussed that we could actually go to some island off Canada or something like that, but it never panned out. So I don't think I stand a chance of getting back into America. I'd love to speak to the school kids that I speak to the school kids here, to restore my karma for the harm I caused bringing drugs into America, but it doesn't look likely.
Well, Sammy's on lifetime parole too, but yeah, I mean, you guys could meet in a neutral place. He has a lot of travel restrictions. I don't know if he would be allowed to come into the UK. I haven't spoken to him about that. But he's got restrictions also, because of the lifetime parole. But yeah, that would be a great sit down, the two of you.
Yeah,
I'd love to monitor that in some way. I should talk to Sammy about it. Maybe we can set it up if he'd be interested in it.
Yeah, because Sammy a while ago put out a video saying, I've never met Attwood, he's full of baloney. But that's because he was tricked into doing it. And his son was the one who was running it at the street level. That ecstasy ring was started by a guy called Mike Papa, and he brought Karen and Gerard Gravano into it. And there was a time in the jail when Gerard he popped up in the Towers jail. This was our first year. And the guards thought it would be fun when we were all going to court to change Gerard Gravano to Wildman.
Oh, did he?
Wildman's looking at me. Wildman's looking at me like, do you want me to do him in? And I said, no, Peter. I said, what we need to do is sit down with him, because it's going to be a long night getting to court. They wake you up in the evening and you're awake all night before the next day's court. So we were sat with Gerard all night. And I said to Wildman, we need to talk to him about his case. They were arrested a year before us. And find out what legal tricks and stuff they've been going through with the prosecutor. So we had a good night with Gerard that night, and he was telling us he was ahead of the curve what legal tricks they were pulling. In the case, I think all of the co-defendants ended up rolling over. Yeah. And props to Gerard as well. He was a champion arm wrestler in Towers Jail. Very powerful young man.
He is, and I like Gerard a lot. He's a really good guy. And sometimes when he has these little entanglements with his dad, he'll call me up. Hey, Mike, what am I going to do about my father and this and that? Lovingly, in a nice way. But yeah, I really got to like Gerard a lot. He's a good. Well, I say a good young man. He's a lot younger than me, but yeah, he's a good guy. Stand-up kid all the way for sure. And
I watched your interview with Karen. I'd love to interview Karen as well. She's got a hell of a story. I can't imagine what it's like to be growing up when your father is, in such a position where there's a lot of homicides going on.
You know what, Shaun, I want to tell you something. I've done a number of interviews. Karen was probably one of my favorite because she was so real, so honest, and I get so mad when people attack her for silly things, nonsense things. It's so wrong to be doing that. The woman went through a lot, she really did, and loves her dad, of course, but she was very honest about the relationship, and of course I related to that in a different way because I grew up with my father, but yeah, you know what, they're two terrific people, both Karen and Gerard. Sammy should be proud of them both, and I know he is, really. And Sammy's doing, he's doing different things, and what I like about him, he tries not to get involved in any of the nonsense on YouTube. And, we all got to deal with it. I just had a flare up. I very rarely, if ever, respond to anything. But there was one guy that got me a little bit. He said something about my father and I jumped out at him. And that'll be it. I'm not going to go into any further. But this YouTube spot has become a crazy genre with all this stuff. I got to tell you, it really is. But Sammy stays above it as best he can. He really does. But this is listen. I think we're gonna have a part 3 to this, Shaun, because really there's a lot more to come, and we could be here for the next 3-4 hours. And maybe when we're on tour, and we do a Q&A, we'll go back and forth with some of this stuff, because I got a lot of stories too that I haven't told about prison, because when I'm on stage, there's only so much you can get into. But it might be a good idea in the Q&A when we get some good dialogue going back and forth. I'm sure you have more stories. I have a bunch. It'll be a lot of fun.
Michael, I think you should really bring in some of your prison stories to the UK. They would love that for the tour. And if people are watching this, links for the tour, it's on Eventbrite. It's in the description box. I'm going to be hosting. It's going to be fantastic like it was last year. So please come along. And if I could just give a little teaser for part 3, Michael. So when Wildman was sentenced, he goes off to the Arizona Department of Corrections, and they come to him, the AB guys, and they say, what are your charges? And he says, I'm having a bad day, F off, I just want to go to sleep. And they say, no, you don't understand who we are. You have to tell us your charges. And he just knocks the guy out, and he goes to sleep. so then, they're saying to him, you don't know what you've done. We're going to find out who you are. You're in trouble, man. Crazy English El Loco. And when they come back, when they've researched who he is, they offer him the job of the guy he knocked out.
Wow. Well, that's a good intro into part 3. So and there will be a part 3. We're gonna have to do that, and of course we'll continue some of this stuff on the tour. And I just want to let everybody know, I know you're going through some rough weather, because I keep up with the weather over there. It's been a little bit rough. When I was there last time, myself, my wife, my daughter, we were there for 6 weeks. There was only 1 day of rain, and it only lasted a half day. Every day was sunshine. As a matter of fact, you had a heat wave. I remember some of the restaurants were closing because they said it was hot. So hopefully we do the same when we come back in March. We bring some good weather. And if we don't, I'm telling you, we're going to bring some good time, good stories, and we're going to have a great time on the tour. I can't wait to walk the streets again and just meet everybody. So looking forward to it. So you and I will be in good contact between now and then. I think I might be coming over a little bit earlier. We won't reveal why, because we got something big going on, and people will hear about it. And it's going to be great. So, my friend, thank you very much for this sit down. And I'll be seeing you soon. Okay, so there you have it. I want to tell you young people this, that are on the street doing those silly things. He's not exaggerating. County jail is no picnic, and if you can survive that experience, you're pretty fortunate and not come out of there with some real scars or come out of there at all. I know. I spent 11 months in LA County. I spent time in county jails in New York. Not a good experience. Trust me, do the right thing. But Shaun had some crazy experiences. He talked about the Italians. He talked about the blacks, the Mexicans. It's a whole different experience in county jail. You're better off in prison than you are in the county. He spent 26 months there. I spent on and off probably about 14 months in county jail. No picnic. So for you young people out there, my message is to you, avoid it. Don't get anywhere near it. Do the right thing. You don't need that in your life. So that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. There probably will be a part 3 with Shaun, because he's had a lot of experiences. I can't wait to get back to the UK with him. We had a great time last time. We're going to have a good time this time, starting March 16th. See you all there. How do I always leave you, my friends? Same way. Be safe. Avoid this stuff. Be healthy, of course, throughout the holiday season. And yes, I mean this to all of my supporters who have been so gracious and just wonderful with me. I really mean it. God bless each and every one of you through this season, your families, your friends, your loved ones. And yes, I'll see you next time. Take care.